regret is a negative emotion that's tied to loss of something, especially something which is perceived as an opportunity that was missed.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today on Second Act TV. I'm so happy to introduce a new content expert to Second Act, psychologist and health and wellness coach, Dr. Leslie Bosch. Leslie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Silke, for the opportunity. I've been a fan of your channel for a while now, and it's such a privilege to be here.
Oh, that's so nice of you to say. I appreciate that. And I'm so glad you contacted me, because once I got your information, it's like, oh my God, Leslie is perfect for Second Act. Because not only do you speak to very important topics, you lived it. You recreated your life after 50. You got your PhD at 53. So, that's all really, really great, because you could speak from a professional perspective as well as a personal. And what I want to focus on today is the topic of regret. This is something that you actually specialize in, because regret is influencing a lot of decisions that we make, especially relationships. And lots of people say, don't focus on that. Don't focus on regret, because there's nothing you can do about it. But I know you say that regret is actually very helpful to get through that.
Right. Well, I think that for me, yes, I don't tend to like the just forget about it, because it doesn't really work. And it doesn't really work if you tell a friend, just forget about it. It's in the past. But if a person is being sort of pestered by feelings of regret, if regret is hanging around, then probably there's something there to look at. And I tend to think you have to take sort of two paths. Either one, how can I grieve the loss of that and let it go and put something new in its place? Or how can I revive that missed opportunity and actually take advantage of it and run forward with it now?
Well, and I always say that one of my biggest regrets, and I've voiced it, I don't know if I've actually said it on this channel or not, but I regret not having left my marriage earlier. I knew after 10, 15 years, it was over. I wanted out then, but I didn't do it. I stayed another 10 years until I finally left. And I'm bringing that up because I know lots of other people are in this situation. And I'm not bringing it up to encourage you to leave your marriage. But if you are thinking about it, regret will be driving part of your decision, whether it's the past or the future. So talk to me about that, regret and relationships.
Yeah, that's perfect, because you're absolutely right. Regret can impact our decision-making ability and our ability to make a good and clear decision, right? Because once we've experienced regret in the past, one thing we know is we don't want to experience it again.
Right.
So that there's a lot of desire to sort of avoid regret going forward. And when we're in a relationship like this, it's always sort of like, you're on the horns of a dilemma. I could be damned if I go, I could be damned if I stay, and I really don't know how it's going to shake out.
Right.
So it makes a lot of sense that basically regret is there to basically say, pump the brakes. This is a really big deal. Let's take some time to think through this and decide if in fact we really want to go. And if so, to gear up and make a plan for going, so that even if it doesn't work out quite the way we imagined, we can still live with the choice that we made.
Yeah. How do you coach somebody through that?
Well, I think the biggest thing that's very helpful to do when we start to talk about whether or not you want to leave a relationship is really to think about some of the core predictors about what make relationships last.
Okay.
So there are basically 4 factors that we could talk about.
Okay.
And the first factor really is relationship satisfaction. And if you think about it, relationship dissatisfaction is really probably what's driving most people to think I got to make a change. This just isn't working for me.
Right.
And then the second factor really is the level of investment in the relationship. So it will be easier for people perhaps who have been married for a shorter amount of time to leave that relationship than it is for people who have invested much more time. So for instance, perhaps easier to leave a 3-year marriage than a 20-year marriage, because there's so much that's been invested.
Absolutely. Well, that was part of my decision, obviously, and this whole phenomenon of gray divorce that people over 50 are getting divorced at record numbers, and that's I think this conversation is important that we bring that up because there will be regret around it one way or the other, and understanding that and how that can help or hurt you, I think, is just really important. Is there another predictor? I think we did 3.
Yeah, the third predictor really is the quality, you're perfect, the quality of alternatives, right? So in other words, if I leave this relationship, what are the chances that I'm going to find a suitable replacement for this relationship? And I think that a lot of people are concerned. We can think about, some people have an advantage when it comes to having more opportunities than other people, right? Mm-hmm. We might tend to think that older men will fare better because there are more free women, right? Then women might not fare as well because there are fewer qualified mm-hmm. men. But anyway, this is definitely going to be something that's going to give us pause.
Yeah, exactly. And, not everybody leaves or a relationship to get into another one. Some just, I'm done. I just don't want to live like this. And then there's, once you start focusing on it, you realize what you really have, and you don't want to leave, especially, once you see maybe what other people are going through. Like another good statistic, I think, is that people that do move on in relationships or second marriages after 50, I think you said this earlier, they are much quicker to break up because of the investment of time. That's why the statistics of second and third marriages failing, I think, is so high, because the time isn't there to where you start to recognize a pattern maybe that you were going through, and it's like, no, I'm not going there again. I'm out of here.
Yes, exactly. And this is why I think a lot of times it really is time. Sometimes the desire to leave a relationship can be more like a red flag for you to say, hey, it's time for you to grow a little right. inside of the relationship, or for right. them to grow a little inside of the relationship, or for the relationship to grow and take on some new dimensions itself, right? So it's very hard, again, when you're trying to figure this out, to sort of make sure that you're thinking it through thoroughly, so that, again, that I am making the right decision. And regret is really there to help you recognize, wait, again, like I said, slow it down and think through it carefully in such a way that you can live with it either way.
Either way. That's a good, yeah. I was going to ask you, and there's probably no answer to that, but the fine line between overthinking and taking action. And what I mean by that is, I regret the 10 years that I waited. That's one of my biggest regrets. I can't get that time back. Yet, when I think about it, I wouldn't have started this channel had I not stayed those 10 years, because that brought up all these emotions I was going through, all the questions I had, talking with other people about it. They're going through the same stuff, and being a producer by trade is like, hey, this is what I want to do, and get back to what I wanted to do, which was journalism and this kind of stuff. So in a way, you can maybe recapture what it is that you regret, or do it somewhat differently. And as you said earlier, if that's not possible, that being consciously aware that you have to grieve that loss.
Right, exactly. And I think it's so good what you're saying about how, even there, you've got that big regret in your life of those 10 years. So that's something that sort of still pesters you. And you're already beginning to try and, again, extricate yourself from that. Sort of like I say, that mire, you're like really sort of stuck with that feeling. So you're already starting to do it using one of the strategies, which to say there's benefit, right? There was benefit. I was ripening my dissatisfaction. I was preparing to exit. And then I would also say that in large part, you were also honoring another value, which is the value of whatever needed there around kids or whatever else was there that you needed to honor, that let that ripen and fruish before they reached a certain age, and you're able to say, okay, now that we've empty nested, I think now's the time for me to break, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to bring up my personal only because I think people can identify with it. I mean, I didn't have kids, but I was the nucleus of the family. I and my husband, we were, we had a big house. All the holidays were there. My sister was there. I mean, we had a big family that always came together, and I knew by breaking that up, I would break that whole dynamic up. What I also found out after I finally did, that everybody said, "Oh, what took you so what took you so long?" Because they saw how unhappy we were, and now everybody's happy. So, but when you don't know that at the time, it is, how do I get through this? Am I going to regret it? Thus, again, the fear of future regret that will keep us stuck or can keep us stuck.
Well, and I think that's the thing too, like you're giving also a perfect example of the fact, like, that you were damned if you left early, perhaps, but certainly damned that you didn't leave earlier, right? So the point is, the decision is never really perfect. I mean, a lot of times we are in this kind of gray area in which, we can see that there was a lot of good things going on for you in that decade, in which you were holding that position for the rest of the family, in which you were, like we say, ripening your dissatisfaction, in which you were making a plan for what would come next, in which you were trying to get clear about what the right thing for you to do was. So it was time well spent. It's just that, again, as a part of a process, right? But again, years later, you would look back and say, oh, well, now that I know, this is the other thing I was going to say about regret. A lot of times once we have that information at our disposal, namely how well it turned out for you after the fact, you can look back and say, shoot, I should have done it sooner, right? But if it had gone very badly, then you might have been like, man, why did I do it at all? Right? I should have stayed. Things were good, right? Yeah. So the final predictor of relationship stability is commitment. So basically, when you're thinking about breaking your commitment and you're a person who really puts a lot of value or weight or importance on your ability to keep your promises, like your integrity, when you're finally saying no to I can't do it, right? I promise to love you and cherish you until death do us part in sickness and in health. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I find I can't do it. This is another big thing. This is an identity threat. And so again, this is the reason why fear of regret might come up is because you don't necessarily want to sacrifice your identity as somebody who keeps their promises no matter what. Right? So this is another thing that you really need to look deeply at and make sure that you can really absorb that shift in identity, if you will.
Yeah. Great point. We're coming to the end of the segment. What else would you like to leave our viewers with?
Well, I think the biggest reason I wanted to come on is because I really just wanted to normalize regret. I think regret, in a way, gets a bad rap. And I think that it can be very challenging emotion to deal with because it is, again, very threatening, the thought that somehow we failed, right, to do the best with the opportunities that we were presented with in our life. And also so we can have regrets that are from the past that we're trying to extricate ourselves from or cope with or come to terms with, if you will. And we can have fear of having an experience of a similarly unpleasant regret in the future. So the point is regret can play a role in the past as we're trying to come to terms with our life, and it can come into play as we're imagining trying to make changes for the future of our life. So I think that it's important just to understand that it is a thing, that we will run into it, that you can cope effectively with it, and also just to encourage folks that if they are finding that they're grappling with regret and they're having a difficult time with it, to reach out and get help, whether it's to read a book or to go to a coach or to see a therapist, but basically really to seek help for processing what's inside of that regret, which is primarily something that's near and dear that didn't pan out in the way we'd hoped.
I love that. And really, people that tell you don't focus on regret, that what's the purpose, moving forward, that's like the worst advice you can give anybody.
I think so. I think so, because I think that especially if a regret keeps pestering, then there's something there that kind of like, some people would say like with your soul work or something like that, but it's a deep desire. Something is there that needs to be honored, something that's there that needs to be looked at, whether it needs to be grieved and let go of once and for all and replaced with something else, or whether it needs to be revived and given a second chance to manifest itself or to fulfill itself or to have a life of its own. And again, we're talking about, desires, deep desires, dreams, hopes, wishes, these kinds of things that really are the things that make your life meaningful and rich and satisfying.
Yeah. Well, I learned a lot on this segment. I mean, I really did. And I think that our viewers will, there's bits and pieces here that will resonate. And I encourage you to leave your comments, leave your questions. Maybe we can expand in certain areas, have Leslie back, because this is a huge topic at this time. After 50, we are focused on where we've been and where we want to go. So, Leslie, thank you again. I will link to all of your information to your website so people can get in touch with you directly. I believe you have a free consultation if somebody wants to talk to you, so I'll point all that out, and I'll see you soon again on Second Act TV.
Well, thank you so much, Silke. It was such a privilege to be with you, and I really appreciate what you're doing for the Second Act, like to help people find their way.
Well, thank you, Leslie. See you soon.
Yeah.
Bye. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already done so, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. And if there's a topic that you'd like to have us cover, visit our website, secondact.tv. We have a little red suggestion box in the upper right-hand corner of our site. Just click on that, drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.